The Scud attacks on Israel went on, but still they failed to break up the coalition as Saddam hoped. In a further attempt to weaken public support for the war, British pilots John Nichol and John Peters, shot down on the first night, were paraded on Iraqi television. They had been tortured and were forced to denounce the war.
I think this war should be stopped so we can go home. I do not agree on this war with Iraq.
The pictures provoked condemnation across the world and only inflamed Western public opinion against Saddam. Saddam was unable to prevent the air campaign systematically destroying his army. So 2 weeks after the air war began, he ordered an attack that would force the Americans into the risky ground combat they wanted to avoid.
Their movement was watched by an unmanned American spy plane, feeding pictures back to its operator.
What do we have here? Holy crow. Let's see what they are. Man, this is something. Here we go. Closer, closer. And 2,253 hours. They've crossed the border in Saudi Arabia. King Fahd's gonna be pissed. Fahd baby's gonna be pissed. He's gonna be hot. Yeah.
The coalition had complete control of the skies over Kuwait, but not a single aircraft was close enough to stop the Iraqis.
Where's our air? This is ridiculous. Frickin' bomber couldn't ask for any better target than that.
Go for it. Step up a smoke. Yep. Right to the right of that.
Troops from America, Qatar and Saudi Arabia now had to fight their way into the city to regain control.
Arm this missile, I'll shoot it down range. Take that bad boy out.
And when air support finally arrived, they had a decisive advantage.
I certainly would not want to be an Iraqi troop up there. Aircraft are swarming over that battlefield like gnats.
After 2 days of fighting, coalition troops finally regained control. An estimated 38 Iraqis were killed and hundreds more captured, but the coalition had suffered too. In their first taste of ground combat, 43 coalition troops, including 25 US Marines, were killed. For some, it had been a sobering experience.
I never expected that kind of fear, but you have to overcome it. Because if you don't overcome it, it's just like being defeated without actually being killed or anything like that.
But with Kafji back in coalition control, world attention turned once again to the air campaign, which was now in its 4th week. Television audiences across the world had become hooked on the extraordinary footage being beamed into their homes around the clock. It was all part of the public relations war. After their experiences in Vietnam, American commanders knew that unfavorable coverage might damage public support for the war. So they carefully managed what was actually seen by the watching world.
Splash. That was an excellent splash.
The American general who commands all the Allied forces in the Gulf has said that Operation Desert Storm has been going according to plan.
The aim was to portray the war as clinical and bloodless, with so-called smart bombs making surgical strikes.
I'm now going to show you a picture of the luckiest man in Iraq on this particular day. Keep your eye on the crosshairs.
right through the crosshairs. And now in his rearview mirror,
but the laughter was about to end. In the early hours of February the 13th, 1991, 2 stealth bombers flew towards the Al Amaria bunker in the suburbs of Baghdad on what was supposed to be a routine mission. Shortly after 4:30 a.m., they released 2 laser-guided bombs.
American criminals!
Hundreds had been killed, many of them children. Pictures of the disaster were broadcast around the world.
I lose my wife and my children. Is that fair? Nobody says something to stop this massacre.
It was a terrible mistake. These images of so many dead civilians and their distraught relatives shattered the myth that this was a bloodless war, and it forced Schwarzkopf to curtail the bombing of Iraqi cities for fear of causing more civilian casualties. But the Iraqi army got no such reprieve. The air campaign had battered Iraqi targets for over a month, and still, Saddam had not withdrawn his army from Kuwait. Schwarzkopf knew coalition ground troops would soon have to drive them out, and in preparation, he intensified the airstrikes against the Iraqi front line. Coalition airmen flew around-the-clock bombing missions attempting to destroy 50% of the Iraqi armor.
We're trying to get ready for the ground troops to go in. So we're really trying to hit them hard in order to clear it out for the ground troops. We send out 300 or 400, 500 bombs a day. Some of them weigh 1,000 pounds apiece, so it's unreal, the tonnage going out here.
He ordered the Iraqi army to blow up the oil fields of Kuwait. It created scenes of apocalyptic devastation.
It looks like what I envisioned hell would look like. The country of Kuwait is burning.
This piece of environmental vandalism only increased the pressure on Schwarzkopf to launch the ground campaign. His plan was a masterpiece of strategic deception. The main attack would appear to come down here, across Kuwait's southern border. 40,000 American Marines would thrust up into the Iraqi defenses. Alongside them, troops from other coalition countries, including large forces from Syria and Egypt. Their job was to make Saddam think they were just the start of a much larger attack from here in the south. But Schwarzkopf's main blow would come not from the south, but from the west. Under the cover of the air war, he had secretly shifted the bulk of his army, 1,500 tanks and nearly 300,000 men, up to 300 miles off to the west to launch a giant left hook. His main heavy tank force, with Britain's men and tanks on their right flank, were waiting for the signal to burst into Iraq and swing east into Saddam's Republican Guard divisions, dug in on the Kuwait-Iraq border.
Out in the Gulf, the big guns of the US warships began a massive artillery barrage onto the Kuwaiti coastline. But the real attack would come from the ground troops. And the first to go in would be the US Marines.
This is it. Have fun.
Got an American flag in this pack right here we're going to raise in Kuwait.
The Marines had to bulldoze gaps in huge banks of sand like this one so the tanks and artillery could advance. As the first troops went in, none of them knew what would happen. In front of them, they expected vast minefields and tens of thousands of Iraqi troops in heavily defended, entrenched positions. Coalition commanders expected the Marines to be able to penetrate just a few miles into the heavy Iraqi defenses, with as many as 1 in 3 of the Marines being killed or injured. But as the Marines crossed into Kuwait, they were amazed at what happened.
All right. Hey, let's go! Get up here!
The Marines continued forward into Kuwait. There was little resistance, and nearly everywhere their progress was unopposed.
Right now.